Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a live edition of Q&A where you get to ask your questions live. This way I get to answer some more questions. We'll see how this goes. And, just checking in with everybody, see how everybody's feeling for this Browns playoff game that's coming up soon. So all of that being said, let's jump into the questions. And also, for those of you who are here early, make sure you do me a favor and share this link, tweet it out, let people know that I'm live right now, who might want to know, and get the word out. Also, another way to get the word out is hit that like button. We got 73 people here already, so let's try to get to 100 likes as soon as possible and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. But this is a way for me to answer more questions than I usually get to because of the live format. And it's a way for me to get potentially follow-up questions to some of my answers. That way there's more of a dialogue. Now, some of the news that broke: Myles Garrett, first team All Pro. I'm going to be doing a video about that probably later tonight. We'll be doing a final recap of who's healthy or not later tonight in a separate video. But if you have questions about all of these things, let's hit them. I got Akalon. Hey Q, if the Browns lose against the Texans, how disappointing would it be? I don't know. I really haven't set in on where my expectations are for this team because it's in front of them. They could achieve it, but on the same hand, if they didn't achieve greatness this offseason or this playoffs, it's 100% understandable. Like, we're kind of banking on a lot of things that once we take a 10,000 foot view of this season, it's not going to make a ton of sense that we're banking on. But right now it kind of makes sense because everything's been working good the last few weeks. So I don't know exactly where I am on that. I think I'm somewhere between, I think they can beat the Texans. I don't know if I'm going in there like we should absolutely 100% beat the Texans, but I think they can. It's going to be a close game. And as long as the Browns give a respect, as long as the Browns don't beat themselves, and if they just lose because CJ Stroud just balled or something like that, I think that's something I can live with. But if they lost because they weren't prepared or just didn't come out ready, that would bug me, right? And I think that would bug a lot of people as well. Now, I did get some questions from Twitter before when I posted the question prompt. So we're going to get to some of those questions here as well. And one of those questions, let me pull it up right here. All right. So we're going to start with RB. RB said, "Hey Q, have you heard anything on Jack Conklin's rehab or how he's progressing?" No, I haven't heard anything. Kelsey says, "Kevin always talks about the importance of reps and making mistakes as a way to learn. Is it fair to assume the inability to run versus the Texans the first time will help them be able to run a second time, or do you think the Jets game was a positive step for the offensive line?" I am going to maintain my stance that I just think this run game is streaky. And the reason I think it's streaky is because in order for runs to work for this Browns team, 90 to 85% of everything they do on that play has to go their way. The guards have to pull at the exact right time. The guards have to win their blocks when they pull. Everybody has to pin down. 85% of everything that needs to go right for the Browns to have a positive run play. And that is too high of a percentage for me to ever think that you're going to be able to run the ball consistently, because it's just too much right? Like there's not enough margin of error for me to feel like you can run the ball 30 times and get 5 per carry. Like, I think you can get a big play out the run game. I think you can get a big explosive out the run game, but consistently getting 5 yards, that's something that I don't believe we can do consistently. Now, if you have one of those days where everything's just magical, everything's just working, and you're able to just block guys and block guys and block guys, then hey, man, it is what it is. But until I see it, I think they're streaky. I think just because of the injuries, because they're down to 2 backup tackles, because they don't have Nick Chubb, like all of the things that made the Browns game have this wide margin of error. Jack Conklin, DeJuan Jones, even Jedrick Wills, like that gave them so much margin of error. We're like, hey, man, only 50% or sometimes 45% of the play has to be right in order for us to get 5 yards on a run play. But now it's too high of a percentage. Like everything has to go right, it feels like, in order to just get 5 or 6 yards sometimes. And when that's the case, you just aren't going to be able to run the ball consistently. I don't think there's a fix to it. I think it is just going to be what it's going to be, which is streaky. They might be able to hit a big run every once in a while. But they're just not going to be a consistent lean on type run game. That just isn't what it's going to be right now. So that would be my answer to that question. The next question is from Sean, who says, we have defied all odds by making the playoffs. Should we be disappointed they lose Saturday? I kind of touched on this earlier with a question that was asked to me. It depends on how they lose, right? Like we always try to set whether we should be excited or disappointed based on the result. But the journey plays a heavy factor in what you feel after a game. Now, obviously the result matters. I'm not saying the result doesn't matter, but the journey is very important, because if the Browns blow out the Texans and win, oh my God, we're going to be excited. If the Browns win because CJ Stroud has a complete meltdown and the Browns also have a meltdown and we just happen to sneak by and win it, we're not going to be as confident in that victory, right? If Joe Flacco throws 5 interceptions and we squeak out of there with a victory or something, we're not going to be as confident in that victory. Or if the Browns just lose a toe-to-toe game and it was just blow for blow and they just lose that game, it is what it is. Like, I think that's one that's easier to eat. But it's more about how you get to that result than what the result is, because there are ways where you can lose, where you won't be as discouraged. There are ways where you can win, where you will be discouraged. Obviously, the result matters a ton in the playoffs. So winning is winning. You will be happy with the win. You will be less happy with the loss, obviously, because you won't be playing football anymore. But the levels that you take it to outside of the base, like, okay, we won or lost, that matters about how you get there, more than anything. The next question I see here is from Casey of the House, who says, if Ward's injury history is a big concern for you, he's such a great talent, but his body doesn't seem to match his fierce physical play style. I don't get this fascination everybody has with Denzel Ward. Like, there are players on this team who get injured more often and more consistently than Denzel Ward, that people aren't like always freaking out whenever something happens with them. Like Jack Conklin is one who has like a massive injury history, but every time I bring that up, there's always like people who get mad at me for saying that. When Denzel Ward's missed less games than Jack Conklin, like it's just, I think we overreact to Denzel Ward. Like, yeah, does he get a hamstring injury every once in a while? Does he miss a couple practices? Sure, but it seems like he's going to play on Sunday. And if all that happened was he was limited for one practice, what the fuck are we actually talking about? You know what I mean? Like we're doing this big hoopla because he was limited in practice one day. It's just, I think we overreact to Denzel Ward in the word injury. Now the concussion stuff, that's serious, right? He's had a ton of concussions, but something where like he had like something with his knee popped up, and like 20 minutes later, Ian Rappaport is like, hey, it's not that big of a deal, and then he posts on Instagram saying he's gonna play. Like, I why are we still acting like he's like this super injury prone guy when I just think that's a misperception of him? Has he had some injury history? Yeah. Does the concussion history concern you? Absolutely. But outside of that, like, I don't think it's as bad as people try to make it up to be. James Brady says, what adjustments do you expect Kevin to make in the game versus what he did 3 weeks when they last met? I don't know what you mean. Like what adjustments will he make? It depends on what D'Amico Ryans opens the game with, and how D'Amico Ryans tries to attack him. I imagine Kevin's not going to adjust much based on how well the offense worked against him last time. Let's see some of the chat questions, see if chat got anything interesting. I don't know. People are arguing about Brian Sipe. I don't know how that got brought up. I don't know how Brian Sipe got brought up. Yeah, I certainly didn't. Q, if you're Kevin Stefanski, do you bring up the drive and the fumble when you're talking about the play? Why? Why would you bring that up? Like, I understand why. Why would you remind players that this team has a history of failing in playoffs? Like, you want them to be confident. You don't want them to have that baggage on their mind. Like, that's not good baggage to have on their mind. And when we think about what that baggage does, like that baggage of the Browns failing in the playoffs in the 80s is the same reason why every time something goes slightly wrong in a Browns game, people in chat panic. Why would you want that for the football team? To have that baggage potentially have that effect on this team. Like, I don't see the positive of being like, hey man, remember the drive and the fumble? Well, let's go play a playoff game. What? What's the benefit? I don't understand the benefit of that. I would stay away from that. Like, there are times to embrace history, and there are times where you just gotta move on from shit. And the drive and the fumble, I would very much love to watch a Browns game where they don't bring that shit up every time. Like, I get so tired of watching Browns games and the graphic, like it's the doom scroll graphic where they're like, oh, look at how much the Browns have suffered. Look at the drive. Look at the fumble. And then they got the team stolen. Like, can we just not do that anymore? Right? Like, I understand. I know what the drive is. I've watched the documentaries on the drive. I've watched the documentaries on the fumble. I've seen the videos about Marty Schottenheimer. We've done it all. We've embraced the history. We've learned it. That's all we literally had to look up to for like 10, 20 years was what the team did in the 80s and how they had these heartbreaks in the 80s. And now I feel like, at least me, I'm at the point to where like, hey man, I'm okay moving past it. Like, we can have a significant game in Cleveland Browns history and just not talk about that stuff. Like, I'm ready to have new memories. I'm ready to have new history to talk about. I'm so tired of talking about the 80s. Like, we gotta move past it, because if we don't, we're going to be talking about that stuff for the rest of our lives. And if that happens, that means the team ain't accomplishing anything. Like, at some point, we gotta let that stuff go from the 80s. We gotta let it go. Gotta let it be in the past. I'm pretty sure there is some drive fumble equivalent for them 60 Browns teams that we don't talk about anymore because we done moved past it, right? We got to move past it. What do I think the percentage of Browns fans at NRG is going to be? I don't know. They're pretty excited about this game in Houston. I would say the Browns probably going to show strong, like, In an NFL playoff game, I think the average for opposing fans is somewhere around like 8%. I think the Browns will probably be at like 15, 20%. And that'll be a really strong number. A really, really strong number. My guy, Fresh Coast Freaks with a $20 super chat. Appreciate that. Hey Q, listening all year. Thanks for the hard work. Only us in the room know the Browns are for real. Ignore the noise. Focus on the flavor of the week, Texans. Is it just me, or has penalties been bad and maybe a worry this year? I don't think penalties have been a big problem for this team. I can look it up though, but I really don't think penalties have been a massive concern. I'll look it up though. NFL PFR team stats. I don't think the Browns have been near the top of the league in penalties this year. Let's see. Season leaders. Penalties. Okay, the Browns have third in penalties in the NFL, huh? Yeah, committed by the team and accepted. And the Browns have given up. Okay, that's why we haven't noticed it. Most of them are on offense. They've only given up 31 penalties that have gotten a first down. So first down by penalties, and then yeah. So I guess they have been high in penalties. Yeah, they're tied for second in the league with Dallas, and Houston. Ironically enough, is at the same amount that the Cleveland Browns are at. So I guess penalty, like, I don't know. I haven't really noticed it, to be honest with you. But yeah, and the penalties are high. So you're not crazy for noticing that. Uh, Liam says outside of Stroud, Stroud was our biggest concern on offense? Devin Singletary. Devin Singletary. I think you have the horses to be able to slow down like Nico Collins or anybody like that. But where you really concern yourself with the Houston Texans is that run game as well. So that is a significant concern. Q, do you think Grenard and Anderson will be 100% for this game? I don't think at all Will Anderson is 100%, because when I talk to people who cover that team, who are the beat reporters for the Houston Texans, they don't think he's even close to 100%. I've heard the quote be 30 or 40% of Will Anderson is better than not having Will Anderson, which is to tell me that Will Anderson is not close to 100% healthy. Now, Grenard, I know less about his situation, but I do know from the people who cover that Texans team, they feel like Grenard is more of a passenger to Will Anderson's driver of that bus. Like they feel like he's the big difference on that defense, and he needs to be out there for them. Now, that's where they stand on that. So I'm just going off of information that I've been told from people who would probably know better. Browns don't blitz that much, so I don't think they would blitz that ton. Patrick says, what are the chances of a Browns home game? We can go to the playoff machine and show you what the chances are. So playoff machine. Okay. So here's how the Browns can get a home game. One, there needs to be an upset, right? They're the 5 seed. There needs to be an upset. So if there is a triple upset scenario where, like, okay, the Browns upset, the Dolphins upset, and then the Steelers upset, then the Browns get a home playoff game versus the Miami Dolphins. If it's a double upset scenario, which means, okay, maybe it's just the Browns and then another team, right? So the Browns and then the Dolphins upset, or the Browns and then the Steelers upset, then you still don't get a second round home playoff game. You would have to play either Kansas City on the road or Buffalo on the road. But if you win and then there's another upset, then you would have the chance to get a home conference championship game. So basically, if you want the Browns to have a home playoff game, your best bet is in the triple upset. Or you have to hope that, a team you feel like can beat Baltimore gets to play Baltimore. And that's difficult. Not gonna lie, it's difficult. I don't think Pittsburgh would beat Baltimore. I don't think Miami would beat Baltimore. Honestly, ironically enough, the Browns are probably like, if the Browns or Texans, I think the winner of this Browns-Texans game is probably the most likely team to give a issue to Baltimore. But that is the problem itself, right? When both the teams playing on Saturday against each other are both the teams that are the biggest threat to Baltimore, then, well, yeah, you're probably playing on the road for the whole playoffs. So that will be that. Let's get back to some of these questions here. Be nice. Do you think Grant Delpit has leeway like Myles Garrett, meaning the decision to choose who to seat? Oh, to sit out. I mean, Myles Garrett don't even get to choose if he's going to play or not. Like, if the doctors say he's not cleared, then he's not playing. And that was the plan for Grant Delpit. They said he couldn't play. He's not playing. We've been through this like all year where it's like, oh, Deshaun's choosing not to play. But then it comes out, the doctors were like, he literally can't. And then it was, well, is Myles going to play? Like, they're making that decision at the doctor level with them. Spencer, do you think Ronnie can handle the pressure? I have no idea who he's referring to, right? Like, is he talking about CJ? Or is he talking about who's Ronnie? Or Ronnie or who? I don't know. Let's see here. Please, some questions. By the way, make sure y'all hit that like button. Someone say greetings from Germany. Somebody said the Browns should bring back Belichick and Saban and let history repeat itself, which is hilarious. The Browns could technically do that. They are both free of their contracts. They are free of their contracts. That is hilarious. I did not think about that. But yeah, they can rebuild the 95 Browns. All they got to do is fire Jim Schwartz, and that's not happening. I just want to make the playoffs at the beginning of the season. I'm sticking to that. All caps. My man Oren ain't playing. Is it a benefit? Okay, Professor Chaos says, how funny would it be if the first Cleveland Browns playoff game played in Cleveland is the Bills and the Steelers? Yeah, that's an interesting one. So that story broke that the Bills and Steelers technically, well, if there is a weather outage, that they will play in Cleveland, which makes sense, but also at the same time makes absolutely no sense to me at all. Like, that they would play in Cleveland, because like, wouldn't just playing that game in MetLife make more sense? Like, I don't know, is weather supposed to go all the way to New York from upstate? I don't believe it is. So why would they move it all the way to Cleveland? It makes absolutely no logistical sense to me. And that would move the game closer to Pittsburgh than it is to Buffalo when Buffalo's the home team. So I really don't think that story is real. Like, I'm looking up right now. Buffalo to Cleveland is a 3-hour drive. It's a 2-hour drive from Pittsburgh to Cleveland, I believe. A 2.5-hour drive. So it's a 3-hour drive, Pittsburgh It's a 2 hour drive, so it's a closer drive from Pittsburgh. Now, like, is Buffalo like that far away from New York? And then MetLife. MetLife Stadium. Okay, MetLife Stadium is 6 hours away from Buffalo, New York. I didn't know it was that far. Well, maybe. Well, what about like Penn State? Could they play it at like Penn State? Would that make more sense? It's like 3 hours away from both. I guess there's nowhere good to play this game, man. Like Detroit, but Detroit's playing a playoff game. I think Detroit would always be like the go-to place for this, but they're playing a playoff game. They could like play it in Toronto, but I'd imagine Toronto is going through the same weather hardship as they are in Buffalo, but that would at least be a little bit more convenient for the people of Buffalo, is they only had to drive like 2 hours. I don't know. Yeah, maybe it is credible. Maybe now the more I think about it, maybe it is because there's just nothing near Buffalo. I didn't know that place was in Siberia. They could play that in Syracuse, right? But I guess the NFL doesn't want to play it in a non-NFL stadium. But like the Syracuse got a dome. You play a thing in Syracuse, it's a 2 hour drive. Like there's no good place. Like there's just nothing near Buffalo, so I have no idea where they play their game. Like what? It's a 2 hour drive. No, my bad. It's a 2 hour drive to Syracuse, New York. It's a 3 hour drive to Cleveland. I guess it makes as much sense as anywhere else, right? I would just imagine they would want to make it a little bit more inconvenient for Pittsburgh fans, but it's not like Pittsburgh's won in that stadium that much this year, in the last like 5 years. So, but yeah, that would be funny. Realistic score prediction, I would say somewhere between like where everybody's at with it, somewhere in the 20s, with the point difference of like 1 to 3 points. Are we overrating CJ Stroud? A lot of advanced stats have him as somewhat average. I think his strength of schedule, I don't know if we're overrating CJ Stroud, but whenever a young quarterback breaks out onto the scene, we are usually enamored with that young quarterback, right? And this caused people to go kind of over the top sometimes with that quarterback's potential, because all we see is the potential with the young quarterback, right? When Lamar Jackson bounced on the screen for the first time, we were like, oh my God, that's the best thing we've seen since Mike Vick. When Justin Herbert was balling, Joe Burrow, like it's real easy to get carried away with these quarterbacks when they're super young and they first pop onto the scene, because they have not had that many trials yet to where you can test them. But then they get tested and then you start to see some of the flaws get pushed to the surface. So, yeah, I would agree. Like, I think maybe a little overrated at this point, but I think he's also a good quarterback. It's just we don't know where to put him yet. It's easy to go and say he should be top 5 because whenever you're enamored with a new young quarterback, you're always going to push him ahead of people that you feel like they're going to pass eventually. Remember, people did this with Trevor Lawrence last year where they were ready to crown him and put him in the top 5 conversation. So I'm always a little weary on that. I like CJ Stroud. I thought CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson should have been the top 2 picks of this draft, not Bryce Young. So I've always been a believer in him. Well, not always, but I've been a believer in him, especially since that Georgia game in the college football playoff. It's just that sometimes we can start treating him like he's like one of the best 3 quarterbacks in the NFL, and he ain't Pat Mahomes, he ain't Lamar Jackson, but he's pretty damn good. Yeah. So I wouldn't want to go in there and think he's a scrub or anything, but I also wouldn't want to go in there, living in your fears versus CJ Stroud when there are other quarterbacks who should scare you a little bit more. Do you think we as a defensive line can keep the pressure on CJ? Yeah. Yeah, sure. Browns have one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. Why would that even be a question? Um, Not really about the Brownies, but are you excited for the upcoming NCAA football game? Well, it's not going to be NCAA. It's going to be college football, which it still might be sponsored. Well, not sponsored, but endorsed by the NCAA. Of course, I'm excited for that. One, I'd be excited to see what kind of customization options they have. I'd be excited to see what kind of not dynasty, but road to glory options that they have and dynasty options that they have. That game's always been known for being super deep, and just another way to play football games. I'm always for. And I think that it would be worthwhile. Like I'm pretty excited for it. I want to build up a program. Hopefully there's a way for me to create my Youngstown State Penguins and rebuild them. But we'll see. I might have to rebuild like Kent State or something like that. Maybe you could choose. Maybe it'll be like a Patreon live stream thing where y'all can choose which team I rebuild, and I could do a rebuild there. But yeah, I'd be super excited when NCAA 25 comes out, and I'm 100% getting it the day it comes out, and I'm 100% playing that for sure. So I'm super excited about it. I've been wanting a college football game. It's funny. There hasn't been a college football game out since I was in college, NCAA 14. So on one hand, it's nuts. On the other hand, I feel so old saying that. But yeah, man, I would like a college football game. So I want mainly because I want to rebuild like a smaller program and have them go up through the ranks. Like I don't want to get the game and play as Ohio State. Like that to me would be super boring. I want to get the game and like play as like James Madison or Georgia State. Maybe I'll do a Georgia State one. If they got that stadium in there, I would do Georgia State and make Georgia State a power and get Georgia State to the SEC. And I hope that they make that as engaging and as exciting as possible because, that's the main reason people get those kind of games. Maybe even a road to glory. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited. Am I ready for some football? Absolutely. 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 It's weird because I'm at this point where I'm so excited that I don't want to be excited anymore and I just want it to happen. Right. So I'm kind of like anti-excited. Like I'm super excited, but I'm also like, man, let's go. Let's just get it through. Let's get to Saturday. Who are some of my favorite people to listen to regarding the Cleveland Browns? Who has good Browns takes specifically? Jake Burns always has something worthwhile to say when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. I always have him on the show. I think he's always like, even if I disagree with him, I think whatever he's saying is worth listening to, and worth evaluating. Even if I disagree with parts of it, I'm like, well, there's something there that he has a good handle on. He's probably one of the best when it comes to like breaking down the film and really understanding what it is that Kevin Stefanski wants to do offensively, and kind of the ethos of the Cleveland Browns at the moment from a more methodical standpoint. You got to learn a little bit of there's a bit of a learning curve to like getting to Jake Burns because it's not like I know nothing about football. I listen to Jake Burns. Like you have to learn some basic building blocks of coach speak in order to kind of get it. But once you do that, and it's not that hard, it's not like he's throwing like advanced level stuff. Advanced level concepts at you and not like explaining them. Whenever that happens, he explains it. But when it comes to like the things that are like more cold, so he's like 11 personnel or certain type of concepts or stuff like that. Like you do need to have a basic idea. Like you need to know what stick looks like. You need to know what 11, 12, 13P is and all of that. So, but he's probably one of my favorites to go to. Always has something super worthwhile to say. Even again, even when we differ in opinion, I think it's always worthwhile where he's coming from, because I believe him to be very reasonable with his opinions about the Cleveland Browns. Indy with the dome would make more sense. If there's a severe weather warning, are they like genuinely? If it's a severe weather warning, I wonder like if the NFL feels like they should like make sure that they disencourage people from like trying to drive to the game, right? Like I don't know. We'll see what they do. I think the Toronto has a dome though, right? Like they could do Toronto. I don't know what like the rules are with that, but they could do Toronto. That has a dome. I don't know if they'd be affected by the same snow because they're not on the same leg. But yeah, Toronto has a dome. Syracuse has a dome. I have no idea what they're gonna do. That's nuts, though. I ain't know Buffalo is that damn far away from New York City. That's crazy. It might as well not be in the same state. Gee, man. Hey, New York must be one of those states like Ohio, where you just drive through it and you don't realize how big Ohio is until you try to drive out of Ohio. Like, there is something about driving out of Ohio that makes it take like an extra 30, 40 minutes every time. Ugh. Even though Flacco is working with the fourth and fifth tackles, what is it that he is doing to make them seem much better? He's just getting rid of the ball quickly. Like, it's just like they're not looking good on tape, by the way. Like, the tackles don't look good. They're getting beat. He's just getting rid of the ball before they get to him. Like, that's the Joe Flacco special. So he gets rid of that ball quickly. And it does a lot, right? Like holding on to that ball, getting rid of that ball quickly, it does a lot for your sack numbers. Do any matchups concern me with the Browns offense versus the Texans defense? No. Like maybe Will Anderson, like if he goes off, that could concern you. But like I think what would really hurt the Browns is interior pressure. We have good offensive linemen in the interior. And then matchup wise, they're going up against a defense that they're really familiar with. So I don't think that there is anything that's like I'm dreading. Because again, they played really well against this defense the last time they played. Again, gonna be a little bit different. They got edge rushers this time, but I do think that they'll be able to find some level of success versus them. Hey QD, how do you get CJ Stroud? Will CJ Stroud get flustered under all the pressure? I don't know if flustered is, but he will get sped up. And any quarterback that gets sped up makes worse decisions. Someone said Mexico City for this Buffalo game. That would be hilarious. Like, that would be hilarious. And look, the NFL has been doing this slow takeover of college football like the last couple of years. Like you see them playing on like New Year's now and stuff like that. How long until the NFL decides we gonna play in Pasadena? Right, like we go and get a championship game out there in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. Like I wonder how long until the NFL decides we gonna take the Rose Bowl, because that's like, to me, the Rose Bowl, and I don't think college football does a good enough job of protecting stuff like the Rose Bowl, but to me, the Rose Bowl is the biggest game in college football. Or at least it's the game that feels like the biggest game in college football. Like nothing feels bigger than the Rose Bowl. And maybe it's my Midwestern bias, but just from a pure visual standpoint, nothing feels as important as the Rose Bowl in college football, because it feels big. It looks different. It feels like college football's WrestleMania. It feels like the granddaddy of them all. It feels like the big event. And I think college football has done a poor job of protecting that, because what they should have done immediately was find a way for these playoffs to not end a week after January 1st, but to end on the Rose Bowl. Like the Rose Bowl should be the end of the college football season. It should always end, or the championship game should be in the Rose Bowl. It should be the grandest stage of them all, because the Sugar Bowl is another bowl game in a dome. The Peach Bowl is another bowl game in a dome, right? Like all of these other games are games and venues that have changed and changed and changed over time. The Fiesta Bowl, all of this stuff with sponsors that have changed and changed over time. You know, it's the Cheez-Its Orange Bowl or whatever the hell it is now. But you know it's never changed? The Rose Bowl. It's been in the same place, in the same spot, and it feels special. It feels grand. You feel the history of college football. It feels like the grand finale of the college football season. And the college football would be smart to emphasize that and find a way for the season to end on the Rose Bowl. Like that should be the biggest goal of them all, is to play in the Rose Bowl. I feel like now that we have a 12-team playoff system, that is not going to maintain itself. And I think it's going to be up for grabs. I think the Big Ten should probably try to steal the Rose Bowl. Like just have their championship game in Pasadena, because it's worked for so long with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 or the Pac-10 and the Big Ten back in the day. Just have that championship game in Pasadena, but also like just keep that history there and keep it super relevant for your team, for your brand, because now the Big Ten's expanding, has those West Coast teams. It would make more sense more than ever for that to be just the Big Ten championship game to be the Rose Bowl instead of another championship game in a dome, right? Again, it feels different. And if I'm the NFL, I'm like, hey, if you ever do neutral sites, you got to consider Pasadena. Gotta. Appreciate the super chats coming in. If you want to make sure your question gets heard before I have to get out of here, please super chat. Dr. Cruz says, hey Q, who do you believe is our biggest test in the AFC? It's going to be Baltimore. Baltimore's the best team. Autistic Kid with $2 super chat. Appreciate you. Give me an unrealistic prediction. Why would I do that? Who do you think the biggest X factor is on the Texans? Will Anderson. Will Anderson. That's the big X factor. I mean, obviously there's CJ Stroud, but Will Anderson for sure. Does Flacco open with a bomb to Cooper again? I don't think so, but maybe to Elijah Moore. Oh, Autistic Kid right here. Here's your super chat. Why do peeps find pass rush percentage a subjective stat? Here's why people are getting up in arms. We'll talk about the TJ Miles thing for a little bit. Here's why people are getting up in arms about the pass rush win rate. It's because it's proving an argument that they don't want to be true. If TJ Watt had the pass rush win rate and Myles Garrett had the sack numbers that were a little fraudulent, they would be making the same exact arguments as us. They have made pass rush win rate arguments before. They know it's a real stat. They know double team percentage matters, but it's not convenient to their argument, so they're just going to act like it's not real. That's why. It's basically just stubbornness and people just trying to root for their guy and throwing out any type of consistency or logic out of their thinking. It's just, hey, I like TJ Watt and he don't got these good stats here, but he has good sack numbers, so screw those other stats. Right? Like that's basically what it is. We know pass rush rate. It's been a real stat for a very long time. It's just that TJ Watt he doesn't have a good pass rush win rate record. And because of that, they'll just throw it out. How many people were like, oh, when was it Baker Mayfield that was walking around here with like horrible completion percentages, or not completion percentages, with horrible QBRs. And then we were like, QBR is not a real stat. Because you just wanted Baker to be good, and that stat was telling you he wasn't good. Or whatever player that you want to be good, that you want to make an argument for being good, and that stat's not, that you're going to just discount that stat because you want your guy to be right. That's what it is. That's basically what it is about. Indianapolis, I think that's the most boring place to play a football game. Like the Big Ten championship should be literally anywhere but Indianapolis. Like I would rather be in Minnesota. Like it's just that Indianapolis is like, you can never convince me to spend a weekend of my life in Indianapolis at will. Like maybe if I had to work responsibility to be in Indy, sure. But like if I'm like, hey man, I got a free weekend, I'm not about to go to no damn Indianapolis. What? Like, please put that game at a better place. I would go to more Big Ten championship games if it were in Pasadena than if it were in Indianapolis. And it's much more expensive for me to go to Pasadena, but it's more worth it because I could go to LA, I could go to Santa Monica Pier, I could see stuff. If I go to Indianapolis, I'm just gonna see the inside of my hotel room. Ain't nothing to do there. I ain't trying to do that. Nobody trying to pay money to go to Indianapolis. Hey Q, the national media keeps talking about how our defense isn't good on the road, yet we are 11-6, technically 5 in my opinion. How do you feel about these comments? Hey man, we got the opportunity to show them on Saturday, right? Tomorrow they got the opportunity to show them. If this defense is a fraud on the road, we'll find out. I would just like to point out that they were pretty good on the road against Houston last time they played, but again, that was Case Keenum. So, I would say they got more than enough opportunities to prove things wrong to the national media now that all their games are going to be on national TV because they're in the playoffs. So who cares? Frank says, sup Q, love the breakdown of the Browns. Do you think Miles is going to transform into God mode for this game? Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Texans decide to play Myles Garrett. Like, are they going to have the utmost confidence in Laramie Tunsil to handle that one-on-one? If they feel like they do, then Myles could have a big game because he'll have opportunities to make plays that teams have just decided they're not going to give him anymore. So, if they put themselves at that risk, might be something that can blow them up. Thank you for the question. And I got Professor Chaos back with another $5 super chat. I don't know why it's not dinging, by the way. It should ding. This is annoying. I got to get that fixed before tomorrow. Professor Chaos says, what do you plan on eating during the stream tomorrow, JK? Going into the game without D-Hop, how would that affect our offense? I don't think it will. I think they feel fine with Riley Patterson. They weren't going to ask D-Hop to consistently kick 50, 60-yard field goals. And they're not going to ask that of Riley Patterson, right? It shouldn't affect you at all. Someone said January Joe doesn't throw picks in January. Hey, man, hope so. Mike Wack says the Rose Bowl has hosted the Super Bowl 5 times. Yeah, but that was before this modern era of the NFL, though. Like, it would definitely be different if they hosted the Super Bowl in the Rose Bowl in 2024 versus like when they used to go to the Rose Bowl in like the 70s. Like, when was the last time the Rose Bowl has had a Super Bowl? I think there's a clear difference though, because the Rose Bowl Stadium, where's the wiki? Rose Bowl Stadium for the Rose Bowl Stadium. It has hosted the Super Bowl. I gotta imagine the last time it hosted the Super Bowl was like in the 90s. Yeah, 1992, Dallas versus Buffalo, which that was a completely different NFL than what the beast that exists today. Not saying the NFL wasn't big news back then, but it's a little bit of a different beast here. So if like the NFL went to the Rose Bowl in 2024, that would be much different to me, and I think that would be looked at as a lot differently, especially now since the Rose Bowl has been kind of thrusted out of its position as the big the biggest game in college football by the college football playoff. But yeah, and the last time the Rose Bowl hosted the national championship game was, so they hosted Auburn versus Florida State, which was an all-time classic. Like, there's something about that Rose Bowl stadium too that, like, you get some of the classic games. Texas, USC, and then semifinals, you got Georgia, Oklahoma, Michigan, Alabama. Like, you've gotten some of the best games out that Rose Bowl, man. Like, that should be the biggest game in college football. I don't understand why it's not. Like, it might be a logistical thing or a money thing, but yeah. Yeah, I see somebody yelling out "Go Blue, national champions" fact. I'm like, oh man. Now Michigan fans are going to be just as obnoxious as Ohio State fans have been for the last decade. And that's going to be fun. Said you watch USC play UCLA in Pasadena. It's a cool vibe. Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, like, if they have the Big Ten championship game in Pasadena, it's going to be cheaper it's going to be cheaper than it would be to go to the Rose Bowl, like the actual Rose Bowl game. So to give like Big Ten fans an opportunity to go like to Pasadena, see a football game that matters in Pasadena, and then it'll feel like the Rose Bowl because you're getting these traditional Pac-12 teams versus this Big Ten. Honestly, I think the Big Ten should buy out like the naming rights for the Pac-12 and just like split the conference into, instead of it being East and West, have it be like Big Ten and then the Big Conference and the Pac Conference, and have it still retain that identity of the Pac-12 and the Big Ten in there. So you can have like Washington, Nebraska, all these teams that are like, they feel more like Pac-12 schools, Iowa, those schools kind of like, Iowa feels super Big Ten, but you know what I mean? Like the teams that are in different time zones than Ohio State and Michigan and all that. They should probably be in like the Pac Conference and just kind of use it like the NFL did the AFL. And instead of it being you're stealing all their teams, it feels more like a merger, and the compromise is that we'll play the championship game in Pasadena, which I know Big Ten fans are going to complain about because like, oh, it's going to give them their fans a free ride into this and that. And then fans travel, fans fly. I don't think it matters where the championship game is as far as like how fans can get there. I think fans will be just as excited to get to Pasadena as they would. Well, fans would be more excited to get to Pasadena than they would to get to fucking Indianapolis. So I think either way, you're going to have a great environment if you have that game in Pasadena. But Big Ten should seriously consider that. Now, I know it's going to be difficult because Washington State and Oregon State are going to hold on to the naming rights because they're hoping to relaunch the Pac-12 and do this weird thing. We're going to play like Mountain West schools and everything else like that. But I'm the Big Ten. I would keep my eyes on that. I would keep my eyes on that and try to buy out the naming rights or at least like the Pac. Right, like there's just buy out the naming rights for Pac-12, all that, so you can just split your super conference into two smaller conferences and have it be the big conference, the Pac conference, and then Rose Bowl. Well, not Rose Bowl, championship game, whatever you want to call it, and then the big championship game. Right, you can have the BIG, the big 1G championship game. Because it's not the Big Ten anymore. It's just the B1G. The B1G championship game in Pasadena at 5:00. Feels like a win for everybody. And I feel like that would make the championship game feel a little bit more special because it feels like you're getting like this interconference play instead of it being like, oh, it's a conference matchup. It's like, oh, Washington's playing. I don't know. To me, it would feel more exciting. It would be like, hey, what if we did take some of the stuff that the NFL has done, but still make it feel like college football? And I think that's the thing that people are forgetting, that I think that's what people are forgetting college football is changing, and I understand that. And I understand that the people who complain about college football changing can sometimes be very annoying, but they have a point, and that is, in chasing the improvement of college football, we should not lose what makes college football feel like college football. And I think we're changing it so fast that we're not keeping track of what makes college football feel like college football, right? And one of the things that makes college football feel like college football is some semblance of regionality, right? And if you still have those brands, that Pac-12 brand, that Big Ten brand associated with a mega conference, it's different, but it still could feel like college football, right? If that championship game is not in a soulless dome, it's at the Rose Bowl, it feels like college football. And that's something that the people in power need to kind of understand, or else they're going to lose a chunk of the audience, is that you can change it. You can have a playoff. You can have this or that. You can make adjustments to the game and people will come back, but it still got to feel like college football. Like, I think that's the biggest issue with like the transfer portal and NIL, is that NIL feels like college football because only one place in the world you could be out here acting that wild with money. So I don't think NIL is really that big of a problem. But like the transfer portal, people leaving a college football team in like 1 year, they don't feel like college football. Shopping around for other teams' quarterbacks to add to your team, that don't feel like college football. And it still needs to retain some feel of college football. However you do that is how you do that, or maybe just what feels like college football evolves over time. But it does need to, like, there needs to be, I think, more of an effort by the people in charge to make sure that these changes still retain a feeling of college football. And like that, the idea was like splitting the Big Ten and making it feel like more of a merger between two power conferences than like a takeover would make it feel like college football a little bit more than it does right now. Because if it just becomes the best 32 schools, it's going to become NFL Junior, and nobody, once you start having people associated with it being the junior version of that product, then it's never going to be able to thrive. And I think college football needs to keep that in mind, right? Not saying that the advancements like paying players is good, players being able to get paid, that's good, all that stuff, players being able to move around, it's good, but they need to, one, have a better organization over this so it still feels like college football. The playoff, I think, is an overall good thing, the college football playoff. They still haven't figured out how to make that feel like college football. It feels like a weird mix of stuff. Like, it don't feel like college football. It don't feel right. And that's, I think, the big issue. Trey Ball says, sup Q, Miles made the turnstile jump a couple times, but do you think he moves around like he has 5-man fronts earlier this year? I think they will do whatever they can to make sure Myles Garrett has a big day this weekend. The Lil Tony 22 with a $2 super chat says, you didn't say anything. I'm gonna try to look for it, Lil Tony. Don't worry. Frank Bennett, Q, will you go to the parade if the Browns win the Super? Yes. By the way, if the Browns go to the Super Bowl, I'm just gonna put the word out. If the Browns make the Super Bowl, I will be in Cleveland for that. Like, I'm not going to go to Vegas or wherever the Super Bowl is happening. I want to do that from Cleveland. I want to broadcast the watch party live from a local bar in Cleveland. So if you own one or you know anybody who might benefit from hosting my watch party for that game, let them know that I'm available. Send them my emails and everything else like that, because I would love to work with somebody on that. But I would want to do a watch party from Cleveland in the city with fans, like watching the game too, so we can get that reaction. Like, I would want to do something remote like that in Cleveland. And yeah, that would be 1000% where I would be. I'm not going to be anywhere else but the city of Cleveland the day the Browns play a Super Bowl game. Trust and believe that. Okay. I don't care where that game is. I don't care if I got tickets. I will be in Cleveland because that's what matters to me. is the people of Cleveland getting that Super Bowl. Like the team, that's gonna be dope. I'll be happy for those dudes, but it's the people of Cleveland who've been suffering with this team for hundreds of years. Well, not hundreds of years, for 20 years. And if those people finally get to experience a champion, that's who I want to be with. I want to be in Cleveland. Like, I don't want to be anywhere else but Cleveland for that. My guy Mighty says, Q, how do you think the run game will do? Are we good with depth at running back? I think the run game gonna be the run game, man. I think you're gonna get some good days. I think you're gonna get some bad days. Like, I think the run game's the run game. I'm not gonna bet on it. I really hesitate betting on that run game. It just has been what it's gonna be. Lil Tony got a super chat in. What are other wild card games you're more interesting in watching? Cowboys versus Packers should be interesting. That score could be 50-47. I think all of these matchups are super interesting. I think Pittsburgh versus Buffalo is interesting because I want to see, like, do the wheels finally fall off on Pittsburgh here for the last couple of weeks. Obviously, Cleveland versus Houston is a very interesting game. I think that Chiefs game, the Peacock exclusive game, that's going to be interesting, right? Not Peacock. The Chiefs versus the Dolphins. I'm really interested to see that one. Hopefully I'm in a good mood when all these games happen. Like, the good thing about the Browns playing the first playoff game is that if they win, you feel great for the rest of the weekend. The bad thing about the Browns playing the first playoff game is if they lose, you're going to not care about any of this shit. Like, it is what it is, but it is going to be tough. So Sunday, I think the Eagles Bucks, that's interesting just because the Eagles have been stinking. I think all the playoff matchups this year are super interesting, to be honest with you. Like, I think this is a good group of teams that made it this year. I don't see one game where I'm like, I know who's obviously going to win or lose that one without a shadow of a doubt. My guy Bo with the $20 super chat. Appreciate that, Bo. Really do. Appreciate that love right there. That's right. Q is like, oh, you talking about college football? Someone said the Kingdom. All right, we just saying domes now. I worry that the transfer portal and teams are going after the best players will hurt development of the players you recruited. Yeah, I don't know how much that's going to be affected. Like, I just think more guys are going to move around. I honestly worry about, like, what this is doing to the academic experience of these football players, because it's already not great when you stay at a school and you play football for 4 years. Like, I couldn't imagine transferring 2-3 times is a great academic experience. And also, like, sometimes college isn't really about what you're learning in the classroom. Is about who you meet and who you get to grow connections with. And if you're moving this much for your college football career and you don't make it, then you just, like, graduate and you know nobody. And, like, graduating college, for those of you who have not done it before, that first few years after you graduate college is some of the loneliest shit you will ever experience in your life. And I can't imagine what it's like for these dudes who have transferred 3-4 times and then, like, don't make the NFL. And then what do? Like, you don't feel like you prepared for anything. Like, it don't feel right. Like, these are academic institutions and not sports institutions. And somebody's switching like 4 or 5, 6 times. It's a bit concerning. Like, hey, I understand that this has become almost bigger than the academics at some point, but also, man, this don't feel right. Like, don't nothing about how college football is moving with the transfer portal right now feels right. Like, it clearly needs an adjustment. Like, this don't feel right. Yeah, they got the portal close or open after the bowl game. Sure. I mean, that solves part of the problem. But like my biggest problem, even before the transfer portal nonsense, is the lack of commitment that schools had to these players. So schools could pull their scholarships at any time for a player for any given reason. And I've always been a proponent that that should not be allowed. There should be more guarantees for the players, and there should be more guarantees for the teams. I think if a player gets a scholarship and signs that scholarship, they should have to be at that school for 3 years. Unless like there is a hardship waiver or something like that. I think Joe Klatt's got the best opinion on it. I'm just basically go search up Joe Klatt's opinion on this, and I agree. Like most of the time I hear him talk about this stuff, I'm like, yeah, he's right. So Joe Klatt has the best opinion on this stuff. I agree with what he's saying. But basically it's like, hey, the school should be forced to honor their scholarship commitment to a football player. And the player should also have some level of commitment to that school. And it's been one-sided where the school has no commitment to you, but the player has all the commitment. And now it's a little bit more even where both sides don't commit to each other. But like, we got to have some level of commitment. Like, you know, you got to be able to commit 2-3 years of development into somebody. And that player has to be able to have the security of knowing that they're going to graduate from that university free of charge if they stay here, and it's guaranteed the second they get that scholarship. You know, I think something has to be worked out where there are more guarantees for these players and for these schools. You know, after your first 3-4 years, I guess, like after your first 4 years at an institution, if you want to transfer, okay, you should be able to transfer whenever and however you want. But I think those first 4 years should be protected. Like, should be protected on some level. First 4 or 3, like whatever's fair. I don't know the answers to that. But 4 or 3 years should be protected for both the school and the player where they can't get that scholarship pulled. And too often when people talk about this, they don't think about like how the school has no commitment to that player. Like, no, the school must be forced to commit to that player once they give them that scholarship. The same way the player has to be kind of forced to commit to that school once they sign that scholarship. It can't be one way. Gotta be both ways. Gotta be a commitment both ways. If the Browns get to the 35 and they're kicking a 45-plus field goal, would you kick it or go for on fourth down? Depends on what the score of the game is. My guy Lucas says, I think the Rams Lions is the craziest matchup. Oh yeah, Goff's returning. Not Goff, Stafford and Goff having that like revenge clash is gonna be crazy. And this is also gonna be, someone said, Detroit's first home playoff game in like 30 years. Hopefully Cleveland's next year. We'll see. We'll see. B Telly with the $1 super chat. Appreciate you. Appreciate you on that. Do I believe Watson can perform in a true Stefanski offense? Probably. Like, I don't think Watson's a great fit for a true Stefanski offense, but I don't think that's what you're going to ask Deshaun Watson to play in. I think you're going to ask Deshaun Watson to play in a modified version of that offense, and you're going to try to get the most out of Deshaun Watson that way. And if you do get the most out of Deshaun Watson, you will have a pretty good quarterback. So it's not about, can you force Deshaun to fit into a square hole? That's not what Kevin's been trying to do. That's not what Deshaun's been trying to do. It's like, can they come together and figure something out? Can they play enough games together to figure things out? You know, we had these same criticisms early in the season for Lamar Jackson. How we talk about Lamar Jackson right now in that Todd Monken offense is not the same as how we were talking about them the first 6 weeks. But they needed games together. They needed to play together to really understand what makes each other click and what plays to call and how they're going to see stuff and get these explosives going. And then 6-8 weeks later, after they played a significant amount of games together in the regular season, all of a sudden stuff starts clicking. I think there was evidence of that about to happen for Deshaun Watson, but ended up getting hurt. Never got to see it. It's just now a big what if. But yeah, I think the same way that Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson had to kind of work together to figure out the kinks of this offense, it's the same way Deshaun and Kevin are going to have to work together to find the kinks of this modified offense. And both styles are going to have to come together. And the good news is that they were doing that. They beat Baltimore in Baltimore with Deshaun Watson. Like, that is something that happened largely because of the efforts of Deshaun Watson in that game. So, you know, it's like we forgot like the first half of the season happened sometimes. It is wild. But let's see if we have any more questions. No, okay, it's just more if Flacco's going to be the backup or something like that. All right. Well, I said I'd give you guys at least an hour. It is now an hour and 18. I've been yapping with y'all. So went, answered you guys' questions. Hopefully y'all had a good time. I know I did. You know, I enjoyed myself. This is a fun use of an hour. But was it Facts Cute? No, it's still the NFL. Okay, coin toss. Okay, yep. So I know I've enjoyed myself. Hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. Please be responsible if you are pre-gaming for Saturday's game. Also, make sure you catch me on the watch party. It's the first playoff watch party in Cleveland Browns Quincy Carrier history. So make sure you're here for the watch party tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I might even start a little early just to make sure everybody has a chance to get in. But make sure you're here for the watch party tomorrow. Make sure you bring your comments, your super chats, your stickers. If you're a member, use some of them custom stickers. I might have to update some stickers. You know, I might have to throw a 15 sticker in there. Maybe a little Flacco flag. I don't know. Maybe I might have to give a little Flacco thing. But yes, most certainly appreciate. Someone said at least 4 shots by 8 a.m. Oh my God. But appreciate y'all for joining in for this live Q&A. Gonna have to work on some other videos to get out for the rest of the day and tomorrow. Now we're gonna move on.